In this video, we're going to take a look at how we can integrate Duo's multi-factor authentication when using the Cisco Firepower or FTD as a VPN termination point. So end users are going to connect to the FTD for Remote Access VPN capabilities using the secure client, the Cisco secure client or Cisco AnyConnect, and when they enter their username and password, being their primary credentials, before they are able to access or successfully connect to the VPN, they will need to complete Duo's two-factor authentication. So to get started, we have a Firepower Management Center, which is managing a demo FTD that we have in our test environment, and there is no configuration currently set up for the VPN. So first of all, we're going to do that in this video. I do also have another video on my YouTube channel that goes through the Remote Access VPN configuration. So if you are looking at how to configure that, then you can also take a look at that video. One thing I want to make you aware of is that you need to make sure that you have the relevant VPN capabilities and the VPN license assigned in order to do this. So to configure a VPN, what we need to do is we need to go to Devices, and then we need to go to Remote Access. And as you can see, it's a blank canvas. So we're just going to go to Add here, or Add a new configuration, whichever option you choose. And then we need to give this Remote Access VPN a name. So it's going to take us through the Remote Access VPN policy wizard, and you can see the steps 1 through to 5 here. So we're just going to give this a name here. I'll just say Test Duo Test Duo Demo, and we're going to leave SSL and IPsec enabled here. We're going to add our demo device, so I've added that into here, and I don't think we need the spaces there. And once we're happy with that, let's click next. And now we get to the AAA section and configurations. So this is where we need to change a few things here. So we're going to use AAA in our settings. You do have the option as well with depending on whatever version you're using with Firepower to make use of SAML as well. We're going to stick with AAA. So our authentication in this case is going to be the Duo authentication proxy. Now the Duo authentication proxy is partially configured in this demo, so I do have some configuration here, and we can take a look at this when we get back to it. But first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to assign the IP address of the Duo authentication proxy, or in your case, if you don't have the authentication proxy currently set up, this will be the IP address that you will be assigning to the Duo authentication proxy. I need to actually specify it here because I don't have it configured. So let me configure new radius server group. I'm going to say Duo here. Let's say Duo proxy. And we need to add it as a radius server. We'll leave the authentication port and the account import as 1813. We will specify the IP address. And that's going to be, again, this is the IP address of the Duo authentication proxy, and we'll specify a key here as well. Now the key also needs to match on the Duo authentication proxy as well, so just bear that in mind. And you do have a few other settings if you do want to choose things using which specific interface should be used for this connection. I will leave this as it is for now. And click save, and we should be good there with those configuration changes. So we'll just go ahead and press save there, and now you can see our authentication server is the one that we've just configured. Now you do have the option to fall back to local authentication, but in our case we're not going to do this. And you can see for authorization server we're also going to leave it as the default selected as well. We'll just specify a few other dummy things here that we won't necessarily need, but we'll apply anyway. So we'll specify an IPv4 pool, and thankfully we've already got one, so I'm just going to specify that there. We'll leave the IPv6, and group policy will leave as default as well. Again, if you are using this in your production environment, obviously these settings need to be considered a little bit more, and things will likely change, so do look into making necessary changes. We already have a AnyConnect image in this case uploaded onto this device, so we're just going to keep that one there. And then now it's asking us on step 4 to specify the network interface for the incoming VPN access. So this is where the clients will essentially terminate your VPN termination point. So the interface is likely going to be your outside interface as well. So in my case, given the lab environment I'm in, I'm actually going to specify my relevant interface. And then I'm also going to specify a self-signed certificate that I've already got on this device. Again, if you're in a production environment or rolling this out in a production environment, please make use of signed certificates so that you don't run into any certificate signing issues as well. There is the option, as is with the traditional ASA, where you get to choose whether you bypass the ACLs for VPN connections. We're just going to leave that as it is for now, so we'll just press next, and then we get to step 5 where we've got a summary of the configuration. So once we're done with that, we'll select finish, and then now you can see that we've got the connection profile that we've just configured here as well. So that's the configuration done on the Firepower Management Center. So we need to now go to deploy that to the FTD. So we'll go over to deploy. And you could also expand this just to make sure that the settings that you are applying are correct. So you can see I've got a few other configuration changes, but the main one that we're looking at here is the VPN configuration. And once you're happy to deploy that, just go ahead and press deploy. You can add some notes if you want. We're just going to say deploy. That's now our Firepower configuration changes deployed for the VPN. So now we need to turn our attention to the Duo administration panel and the Duo authentication proxy before we can test. And with access to Duo, what we want to do is we want to head over to applications, and then protect an application. And then we just want to search Firepower. You can see we've got a few options. So we're going to use the first one. We're using SSO or single sign-on if we were using SAML, but we're just going to stick with the top one here, which is going to make use of Radius. And if you do want to check out the documentation, you can just open the link that's next to the application, and this will give you all the information about how we can set up this particular integration, as well as some other bits of information around the authentication proxy as well. So I always recommend when doing these sorts of deployments to always check out the documentation as well from Duo. So we'll go to protect now. And what we're going to do is we're going to need the integration key, secret key, and API hostname. The secret key, do not share or write down or give it to anybody. This needs to stay a secret. So what we want to do is I always ask customers to set up an application policy which is specific to the deployment that or the integration that we're looking at. So I'm just going to say Firepower VPN demo. That's the name we're going to give it. and we're just going to say that it doesn't support, this particular integration will not support inline enrollment. So we can leave that as it is. We're just going to say that we'll just keep those two on. So we're going to enforce MFA and have users have to be enrolled within Duo, and we'll just create that. Again, if you're looking at deploying this in production, you may want to focus a little bit more around the policies that Duo has to offer for your particular integrations. For us, again, we're just going to change this to FTD demo or VPN demo. We're going to use username normalization in my case, which is simply going to strip any domain name or anything after the username to allow us to log in, and we'll leave the rest as it is. So we'll just go ahead and save that. Okay, so that's our application configured and created that we want to use to allow two-factor authentication when accessing our FTD's VPN. Now, the next step and the last step is to focus now on the Duo authentication proxy. Now, this is a lightweight application that needs to be installed in your environment, which will allow us to communicate between the identity provider, likely being your Active Directory on-premise server, and allow us to complete that two-factor authentication. So we need, as I said a little bit earlier on, we need these three. So we need the integration key, secret key, and API host name. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the authentication proxy, do check out my YouTube channel, where I do have a video around installing the authentication proxy, and also check out the Duo documentation, which will give you more information on what it is and how to set it up. As I said earlier on, we already have it configured. We're not going to focus on exactly what everything is, but just know that we have our Active Directory connection from this authentication proxy. So this is going to allow us to validate and communicate with the Active Directory server before we complete two-factor authentication. The areas we need to focus on are going to be down here now. This is what we're going to configure as well. So again, I would recommend you do check out the documentation here, because you can see that we have some information around configuring the authentication proxy and exactly what each option is. I'm not going to explain each of these options today, but we are going to configure these steps now. So as I said at the start, we do need these. So first of all, we're going to start off with the integration key. And then I'm just going to mark out these fields here. I'm just going to paste in these here as well as we go along. So our secret key, we do need the secret key. As I said, this is a demo, but what you can see here actually is an encrypted password or secret as well. So I do recommend you check out the documentation on how to do that as well. With this being a demo, I'm just going to copy and paste this in, and you will be able to see this. But as I say, in production environments, do make sure that you encrypt these and don't share secret keys with anybody. We're going to copy the API host name in here as well, and we'll mark that out there, and that should actually be the same. Let's just quickly do these. So radius IP, if you have more than one IP address, then it is easy enough to add another one. All you have to do is copy this onto a next line and change number 1 to number 2, etc., etc. So our radius IP is going to be the IP address of the FTD in our case, or the Firepower Threat Defense. So I need to put that in there now. 001 in my case. And again, we just need to specify that secret. And one thing actually that I need to point out is that if you encrypt the secrets and passwords in the authentication proxy configuration. Some of the fields are going to change. So you can see here I've got S key protected. Now we've not encrypted this key, so it's not going to work. But if you're not encrypting, it's important not to specify protected, or else your configuration won't work. So I'm going to enter the secret key now. Again, I'll just remove the old information here. I'm just going to enter the very secure Cisco. We're going to use failsafe as well, or fail mode safe. And we're going to specify our client for those primary credentials as our Active Directory client as well. And ports, you don't really need to specify unless you're using a custom port, something different than the usual radius ports as well. Once we've done that, we need to validate the configuration and save it. So we'll just quickly validate that. And before I actually go through with testing, what we're going to do, you can see here, is throwing out the errors because we've not encrypted this. So just before I validate this, I'm just going to remove these protected parts here, at least in the radius server configuration, because we're not encrypting these in this particular demo. So just remove this here, and I'll also remove it under the S key. And then if we just validate that, you can see there that we have no issues. So let's just go ahead and save that. Always make sure you validate just to make sure you don't have any issues. And once you've saved that, now we just need to restart the service for those changes to take effect. So once that's started, what we'll do is we'll just use the same client that I'm connected to connect to that VPN, and we'll see what the behavior is. However, just before I do that, I just want to head back over to the VPN configuration changes that we did, because I want to make sure that we don't get disconnected as part of the connectivity test. So I'm just going to head back over to our remote access. And there's also one more thing that I want to point out as well, which I see many customers run into and have to end up changing. So if we just go across to our advanced tab now, and we have a look at our group policies, we're using default group policy, so let's just go into that one. And if we just go down to split tunnel, we're going to tunnel specific networks, and you can see we've got a tunnel, a set of IP addresses in there that we're going to tunnel. So this should allow us not to basically get cut off as part of this test if that tunnel object is correct. I've not checked that, but I'm assuming it's correct, so I'm going to leave it. The other thing as well is if we just go to our object management and just check out our AAA radius configuration, and we go to AAA server and radius server groups, and the one that we configured, if we just go into it, and this is again one thing that I see customers often forget to do, and they end up with what they think are issues until they change this. Essentially what we want to do in our radius server is we want to change the timeout value. So you can see here we have a timeout value of 10, and we can have that all the way up to 300 seconds. So I'm just going to change that to 60 seconds. And what that's basically going to allow is users to receive the MFA request and have enough time to be able to authenticate before actually receiving another request. Now, if you leave it at 10 seconds, the chances are the user is going to be spammed with multiple MFA requests and essentially get annoyed with that. So we'll leave that at 60 seconds, and we'll just save that. And we will need to just deploy that again. So while we're deploying that in the background, we can also test to see if our VPN's up and to see if we actually get the desired result with the MFA. So we'll just deploy that. And one more thing, in your Duo administration panel, you do need to make sure users are already enrolled. And by enrolled, I mean fully enrolled. So they have a username in here, they have a device enrolled, and they're good to go. So we can see here that my user Kelvin is fully enrolled and has a device enrolled as well. So we'll probably try and use that user as well for this test. So we don't have the AnyConnect client already installed, so we're going to have to go to the browser and navigate to the VPN termination point. In this case, in my demo, it's this. And we get the certificate error because we're using self-signed certificate. That's fine. We'll just advance that. And now you can see we got to the VPN portal, and this is where we need to sign in. So you can see our connection profile that we created, test Duo demo, and we're going to sign in now with my user. And I've already received a push notification to my device. So I'm just going to accept that, and now you can see it's going to sign me in. And I've actually received another one already, so I've had to use 2 there, and that's because we didn't change the VPN timeout value, and we already know that we're doing that, and the configuration change is pushing now. Nevertheless, we've signed in here, and we can now download the AnyConnect client. So I'll just download that because it'll be much easier for us to demonstrate the behavior. And I'll also share my device that I'm using for 2-factor authentication so that you can see the request come through and the process in full. So we'll just install the VPN, the AnyConnect VPN client here. Just run through this install. Okay, and we click finish there. So that's our AnyConnect client installed now. So we shouldn't need to use the browser anymore for that. And if we just head over to the Duo administration panel and we go down to reports, we should be able to see that last authentication, that successful authentication attempt that I've just done to access that. And there you can see I received 2 push notifications, and that's because of the timeout value. You can see the IP address. This is a lab environment, so don't worry about that. And you also have some other information there as well. Point is, we can see that access has been granted, and we now know that the 2-factor authentication with Duo is in place and up and running and working. So we can see now that that change has been made successfully. So now we should be able to use the AnyConnect client to access our VPN and not receive the 2 notifications this time. We should only see 1. So I'll just get that open now, and you can see it just come up there on the bottom right hand side. And I'll also share my mobile device as well, where we're going to receive the push notification. All right, so I've got my device here with the Duo application installed, and what we're going to do now is we're going to connect to this VPN. So I'll just connect here using the AnyConnect client, and I'm probably actually going to need to change the certificate settings so that we can connect to an untrusted server. So let's change this here, and let's just connect again. And now you can see I can connect. So I'm going to connect there, and you can see now the connection profile or the group, and I'm going to enter now my username and password. And now you can see the Duo 2-factor authentication because my primary credentials are correct. Now we should only receive 1 notification because I set the timeout to 60. So I'll approve that. And there you go. So that's approved. And now you can see on the VPN AnyConnect client, we can see that that's actually failed. But, you know, the process in terms of connecting is in place. Now this error is just to do with a setting that we've not changed in the VPN policy. So we can, if you do receive that, we can go back and change this. So we'll just quickly do this and push a policy again. Not part of the process, but I'll show you this just in case you are new to Firepower or ASA and you are setting this up for the first time. Just go across to our group policy now. We select the one that we're using and edit that. Let's go to edit group policy and let's go to any connect, and then let's give or create a profile. So I'm just going to say test VPN profile, and I already have an XML file in here that we can use. So I'm just going to add that here, and then we'll specify that new profile that we've created, and then we'll save that again, and again we will deploy the changes. And this is only if you don't have not configured the VPN before, and you need to configure different VPN profiles, etc., etc. You can specify that in the VPN profile editor, and then add that to Firepower, so that the devices pull that profile and are allowed to connect, and you don't see that issue there that we saw a little bit earlier on. If you've already got one set up, it's likely that you've already got these sort of things configured, so you may not need to worry about this. So I'm just going to now close this VPN client, and then we can start again in a moment once that configuration change has been pushed. Alright, so once that change has been pushed again, now we should be able to open our AnyConnect client again. And this time we should not receive the VPN issue. So let's just go to connect again. I'll bring up my device and I'll just enter my username and password again. And there you can see I've received the request again, so I'll approve that. And let's connect. Let the VPN do its thing, and there you go. You can see that we've now connected, and we only received one push notification because we changed the timeout value as well. So we'll just minimize this now. And if we go across to our logs, and let's just refresh these here, you can see that our most recent request has been approved. We only received one, and that's great. So our configuration is set up exactly how we want it now, and that is how we can quickly and easily configure a Firepower Remote Access VPN solution to protect access requests with Duo's multifactor authentication as well.